Hi, I'm Anna Marie Cox, and I did not start this war, but I will finish it.
Hello, I'm Daniel Dresner. Podcasters, together, strong.
Welcome to Space the Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of
Anthropocentric sovereignty
and Marxist anthropology. Today we'll be talking about War for Planet of the Apes. All of these movies have two long names, Dan, which is available on Hulu and Max, and I think streaming almost, if you want to rent it, a bunch of different places. In the next few weeks, we will be talking about Congo. We just recorded that episode, and also Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Yes. They really need to work on these movie titles, Dan. They're too long and they're too similar.
They have to fit Planet of the Apes in there is the problem. Like, maybe the problem is they need a good acronym like POA or something. I don't know, or POTA. Like, Kingdom of POTA would make much more sense than, like shorter. POTA, Planet of the Apes. POTA, yeah.
We were celebrating April, and now we're celebrating MAPE. And we have a disclosure to make.
Yes, this is a two-time celebration in this case. Anna and I recorded our conversation about War for the Planet of the Apes already. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties on my end, just to be very clear.
Dan's
all my
technical
fault.
Difficulties.
Totally on me. Due to Dan's technical difficulties, we are re-recording. Although we are trying to salvage at least one portion of the original recording, which was delightful, and I really hope is salvageable.
We won't tell you which portion, because it will probably be obvious.
Yes. But the point is, it was a spontaneous conversation that we enjoyed immensely, and I don't think we can recreate in all of its effervescence. So hopefully it'll be in here. But other than that, we're recording this after we recorded Congo, even though you were going to hear this probably before you hear our Congo podcast.
Yes. And the other thing I wanted to say about this having to re-record it is usually practice makes perfect. Sometimes it means we're not as spontaneous. And believe it or not, though we have a script, sometimes we're spontaneous. Dan.
Yes.
Sometimes the things we say to each other are new. But the thing is that I think this episode, it might be as good as new because I have no memory. Of recording the episode. Except for the thing that maybe we're building up too much, but except for that one piece of the script or one
riff we had on the
one riff
script
we had, I don't really remember recording this. I don't really remember the movie, and I think that says, I remember I was trying to tell someone about it, and what I remember is Gary Oldman, but
except who's not in this film, just to be clear. He's in the previous film.
That's right. He's not in this film. So
he's not even in this film. That demonstrates. No. This I do remember. One of the things we agreed upon after watching this, and we were talking about it, is that this is War for the Planet of the Apes follows, I believe, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and then Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I believe Rise of the Planet of the Apes was the first reboot or modern part. The one with James Franco. Then there was the next one starring Gary Oldman, which is, we have also agreed, was the best of the three movies of the modern Planet of the Apes. And we also agree this one is the worst one. It's not bad.
That's right.
It's not as good.
See, it's the names. It's the fact that they have the same basic kind of like message/plot, They're enjoyable movies. But obviously, for the life of me, it's so hard to tell them apart. I think the next one, the one we're going to do in theaters,
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes,
I think might be in memory distinguishable because the Ape Society has gone somewhere else.
Right. I believe there's a flash forward as there were also. I don't think any of the characters from
no Caesar.
The previous three films. Yeah, there's no Caesar. I don't think there's a Maurice either. I think they're all gone. So, it's sort of like, actually, to tie it into Passover, there's a kingdom who, did not know Joseph. Or there's a pharaoh who forgot the name of Joseph, So
how
something
is
like
this Planet of the Apes like any other Planet of the Apes?
How is this Planet of the Apes different from other Planet of the Apes?
Right,
not the worst way of doing this film. By the way, just point out, if you heard ads at the beginning of this,
oh yes,
one of the ways to avoid the ads is to become a patron. Our Patreon page is patreon.com/spacethenation. Also gives you early access to podcasts, access to patron-only episodes, which reminds me, we still need to record our Hunt for Red October celebration of 250 patrons, access to our wonderful Discord channel with lots of delightful people and really sparkling, effervescent conversation about a variety of topics.
And also you get access to our Ask Us Anythings, which if you enjoyed like the spontaneous banter that Dan and I just had, where we just talked about like the problems we have with recording the show, you will get
that was gold, Anna, gold.
In AUA. In an AUA, you will get us chit-chatting. Answering patron questions, but also chit-chatting. Okay, bad ads, Dan. Bad ads.
Bad ads.
Become a patron is the best way to stick it to capitalism. Yep. All right, so we actually already covered a bunch of the stuff we usually cover in our intro. It's April, MAPE. Will this podcast ruin it for you? I think that we kind of covered that in a way. The podcast didn't ruin it for me. I barely remember.
Yes, literally, we're going to be saying things like, the CGI is very good in this film. Woody Harrelson does Woody Harrelson things. It's not going to ruin it. We agree, and we'll talk about why. It's the weakest of the recent Planet of the Apes films. But again, not necessarily bad. It's, again, like the original Planet of the Apes, a very strange mix. One of the conclusions, one of my takeaways from April MAPE is that sci-fi plus ape equals automatically a fair amount of goofiness. It just cannot be avoided. Like, bad plotting is, I think, endemic to this.
I'm trying to think if, like, the original Planet of the Apes is not that much goofier than the other ones. I mean, the CGI has changed a lot, obviously, but...
Well, there is CGI, yeah.
Well, I mean, the special effects, the ability to make the apes seem real has changed a lot. But Congo is worse than the original Planet of the Apes.
Oh, by far. That's not fair. Yeah. The original Planet of the Apes, as we said, it's schlock and awe, but the awe is legitimate. There is some legitimately great iconic stuff in there. There is nothing iconic in Congo. No, absolutely not.
And so, you're going to get goof. There's going to be a fair amount of goof involved in anything involving apes, unless they're real apes, as Michael Crichton demanded. For Congo, which you will learn more about in that episode.
You'll learn about it in our next episode, yes.
So previous experience.
Previous experience. Anna has seen this film and has no memory of it whatsoever. I knew that I saw this film at least once before.
Really?
I don't remember much of it. The only thing I did remember was the ending battle, which amused me to no end and stuck in my head for reasons that we will explain when we talk about it.
Real stupid. Real stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, the story behind the story. This is the part of the notes that I didn't keep, so we're going to just review very quickly. Yeah, so I learned something every time Dan and I screw up. And one of those things is this time is that I need to not toss out my notes after we record the show.
When someone writes your biography on it, like, those notes are going to be valuable. I'm just saying.
Yeah. There is a friend of mine who's like, I'm going to be your literary executor. And every time I write in my journal, I'm like, hi, Jake.
No, I want someone to be able to do that. I want someone to be my literary executor. Like, hey, Ralph. Right. Just want to let you know I love you, man.
Yeah, well, I don't do it like every time, but often when I'm writing in my journal, I have this thought of like, hey, Jake's going to be reading this someday. Hey, Jake. All right, so the things that we agreed were important about the story behind the story is that this was greenlit almost immediately. It was considered just a gimme by the studio.
After Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was released.
And actually, and it was actually the CGI that they just did a screening of it, and the studio was like, go. We think this is going to be great. And we thought it would be interesting to list some of the inspiration that the writers had, whose names are Matt Reeves and Mark Baumbach. It was also directed by Matt Reeves, who got his start, I remember this, Felicity. So they did
yes.
They did an ape writing binge, an ape viewing binge, but they didn't watch any movies with apes. They watched The Great Escape, Bridge on the River Kwai, which is, I don't know if they knew they were being self-referential or not.
Right, because just to be clear, Pierre Boulle, who wrote the novel Planet of the Apes, also wrote Bridge on the River Kwai.
And who got an Oscar for the movie
Bridge on the River Kwai, even though he does not speak a word of English.
It was written by a blacklisted author.
Who then helped on the Planet of the Apes screenplay, I believe.
That is right. It's all writing. Hollywood is a flat circle.
It's the Circle of Apes, yes.
Circle of Apes. So Ben-Hur, 10 Commandments, Bridge on the River Kwai, and then a little indie movie called Apocalypse Now. Some influence on this. Poor Woody Harrelson. I don't know why I was thinking that was baby voice. It's going to be silly. But the thing I really wanted to talk about in terms of what I found most interesting about the behind the scenes stuff is Karen Konoval plays Maurice, who is my favorite ape, number one. And she brings a lot to that role. I mean, it's yes, we normally think of like these films as it starring, as I put it, the Meryl Streep of CGI, Andy Serkis, because he played Caesar in all three of these. And we'll talk about this. There are other actors who wind up like standing out in their CGI roles, and one of them is Karen Konoval. And the reason I wanted to bring her up specifically is that she is someone that we don't talk about much in terms of Hollywood, the kind of actor who just works constantly. She is a consistent actor in all kinds of things, all kinds of projects. I'm looking at her filmography, and she has worked almost every year since 1993. She has had a part in a movie. And
you go, Karen Conover, you go.
Yeah,
I feel like in Mean Girls, like, you go, Glenn Coco. Yes.
Yeah, and she has been in a TV show every year since 1989. Like, literally, I'm looking at the list, and she's worked consistently for now 40 years. Is that what yeah, I mean...
89, not quite 40. It would be 35.
Yeah, 35 years. I mean, it's very impressive, and her roles have included a bunch of sci-fi stuff, but also, I don't know, The Good Wife. She was in, okay. And she is a friend of the pod in that she was also in one of my favorite good bad movies.
Yes.
2012. She played the president's assistant. So I just wanted to give a shout out to consistently working actress Karen Konoval, who also is just very good in this movie. And
talk about her a little later.
No.
Now let's get to Chekhov's What's It. This is...
See, in the original we were told there's no weird pauses. It was just completely, just rolling along.
Not a single filler word was said in the original. No. The original version of this podcast was perfection.
Yep.
And due to my technical difficulties, you will never hear it. But we are going to get Chekhov's What's It. This is the thing that often appears in Act 1 of the film that winds up being somewhat relevant in the third act. Anna, what do you have?
I don't remember what I originally said, but...
I think I know what you said. I actually do remember what you said. I believe you had Chekhov's doll.
Oh, that's what I was going to say again. Yay!
Hey, see? Oh, that's wonderful. Anna, in all seriousness, you might recall, I forget a lot of stuff. Like, my memory is not fantastic. And one of the things that my wife is endeared by is that very often she will tell me a story about something that she has told me before, but I, of course, have forgotten it. But what delights her is that I usually I'm consistent in my reactions, that I have the same reaction when she tells me the story again. I don't think she's going to be able to commit me until I have a different reaction to these stories. So that's good.
Right, so she tells you a sad story and you're like, well, that's sad. And then she tells you a funny story and she's like, oh, that's funny.
It's not quite like that. It's more like, my response. Not the emotional response, the intellectual one. My Chekhov's What's It is Chekhov's water bottle, which I did like, in which Caesar does not want to give the water to Nova, but then winds up doing so. It's a nice little plot moment. Right. Speaking of plot, should we get to the plot?
Okay. I'm just going to tune out, Dan, but go ahead.
No, I think you need to listen, Anna, so you actually remember what happened in the film, okay? You got it. Come on.
I'll
you
stay
can
with
do this.
You. Okay.
All right. Let's get to Act 1, Monkey Backstory. So, just to set the stage, this is 15 years after a genetically engineered virus made apes smarter, all the while killing most of the human population. Caesar, the head ape, his family, and his colony of apes are trying to live peacefully in the Muir Woods. Because of an attack on a human outpost led by Caesar's more vengeful friend Koba, 5 years earlier, however, a human militia is hunting Caesar's colony. The militia is aided by the vestiges of Koba's guerrilla mutineers, like Red, and are called Donkey by the human troops. The humans launch a foraging attack. Caesar's forces counterattack and win the day, but at a high cost. Caesar lets the surviving humans go with a message to their colonel not to come into the woods again. The donkey ape Red escapes from his guard Winter. Caesar and his tribe discuss leaving the woods for a safer oasis scouted by Caesar's older son Blue Eyes. That evening, however, the colonel and his forces launch a raid that kills Blue Eyes along with Caesar's wife Cornelia. His younger son Cornelius survives. Distraught with grief, Caesar orders the tribe to head to the oasis while he decides that this time is personal. His friends Rocket, Luca, and Maurice decide to join him. Anna, we talked about this. One of the flaws in this film is that Caesar makes some pretty stupid leadership decisions at key moments. Leaving your tribe behind so that you can go on a personal revenge mission and then bring along all your key subordinates, leaving the tribe to fend for itself. Not the best move. Dumb move.
Yeah, one of the things in the first movie where he becomes uplifted is how good a chess player he is.
Right.
I don't know much about chess, but I think that this particular move would not be good in chess, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm going to be the king. I'm just going to march ahead, one square at a time. Nothing's going to happen to me.
Yeah. So again, don't know much about chess. Feel like this is one that there's an analog and it's dumb. So I agree. I did, however, in my notes, like as soon as he said he was leaving and started off, I was like, oh, he's going to gather, there's going to be a gang. Like there's no way they're going to make a movie that's just Caesar going off on his own.
Right. There's a posse that's going to form. Yes.
And they're not just going to never see the other apes again. Like they're just going to go off. Like, all right.
And again, actually, so the way I would put it is that Caesar makes two bad decisions. First, he's like, I'm going to go off on my own. Then when his friends like, no, we're going with you, he doesn't say, no, you fucking idiots. Watch over the tribe, watch over the colony. He's like, okay, fine, you can come with me, whatever.
You could make, I think, a good movie where he doesn't bring on the other folks, where you would be like, no, I'm going to leave, my capable Lieutenant Maurice in charge, or whoever, Luca, Rocket. And then you would have maybe a B plot line where you go along with them, and then somehow they wind up, well, like what happens is that they wind up, spoiler alert, we do we do see, I do remember this movie, Dan. I do remember the movie. This is all coming back.
Okay.
I've been uplifted.
You're getting the ape flashbacks now. That's good. Anna had ape amnesia, but now it's coming back to her.
Yeah.
Let's get to the plot. In fact, actually, we can explain what's going on. So,
I was going to make an ape joke. I don't have it coming back like an ape. It's coming back like an ape comes back. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. All right. Go ahead.
All right, let's get to Act 2. Bad plot. Tracking the forces that attacked, Caesar kills a man in self-defense. Maurice finds the man's recently sick daughter, who is mute, and befriends her, eventually calling her Nova. Caesar wants to leave Nova behind, but Maurice insists that she accompany them. They find the soldiers' camp, along with Winter, who admits telling Red where the colony was in exchange for his life. He also says that the colonel is heading north to meet other soldiers. When militia forces approach the tent, Caesar smothers Winter to death to prevent him from crying out. Tracking the militia, Caesar's group discover a group of executed soldiers and one dying survivor, who is mute like the girl. As they try to pick up the militia's trail, they run into Bad Ape, an escaped Sierra Zoo chimp holed up in a ski resort. Caesar persuades Bad Ape to lead them to the fort where the colonel and his forces are holed up. Encountering a human patrol guarding the fort, Luca is killed and Caesar is captured after realizing that his tribe has been imprisoned in the fort. Anna, Andy Serkis is always great in CGI roles. I mean, he's been a trailblazer here. But as you said, Karen Konoval as Maurice and Steve Zahn as Bad Ape, I think are actually the real standouts in the film. Zahn, I know you weren't as crazy about his performance, but I think Zahn really does a tremendous amount with his vocal inflections. It's consistently funny. And I do think my single favorite scene in this film is the first wordless interaction between Maurice and Nova, which also highlights how good the CGI is in this film.
Yes, I am remembering feelings that I had about this movie. The sense memories are coming back. Karen Konoval is good. The Maurice scenes are generally good. Mm-hmm. I did not like Bad Ape. As I said before, I
Bad
feel
Ape,
like in the world where apes rule everything, like if we were in this world, this was just like a regular movie.
Right. In other words, if you and I were apes doing the podcast, talking about this film,
I believe I would find Bad Ape racist.
You would argue the social justice ape in you would be like, okay, that is just so racist.
Or classist or something. Like, I feel like he's sort of quasi-pathetic in this way that I did not like.
Well, so this is where I will defend the film. Like, we disagreed on this. My defense of this was that, remember, the thing that made Bad Ape distinct...
I don't know if I find him racist, like, talking right now. Like, I don't know if it's a racist trope or not. I just feel like if I was an ape looking at this movie, I might find it...
Sure. No, because he does... No, to the extent, like, he doesn't have the same sense of dignity, I think would be the way to put it, that Caesar or Maurice have.
Yes.
And I think that's fair. What I would say, though, is that the reason he's an interesting character, and I do think the film sort of makes this clear, is that up until now, all we've seen is Caesar and his tribe. What we learned from seeing Bad Ape is, first of all, he had a very different background. So he was a zoo ape, which leads to different effects. And also, I think, like, Caesar and Maurice actually, I think, have a conversation where they were surprised. They didn't realize that other apes also wound up becoming as intelligent as they were. So, like, I think this is a case of Bad Ape being intelligent, but also having no socialization whatsoever with other apes. So I forgive his behavior. His behavior actually anthropologically makes sense, is the way I would put it.
I see what you're saying. I do. Yeah. I also think it opens up something that I guess maybe Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes might get into, I don't know, which is this idea that all over the world there are apes that have been uplifted. Oh, I do remember one of the things that I had a problem with, which is it's a big deal that Caesar can talk, and it's identified as being like a sign of like kind of superior intelligence or something. Like it's kind of a problem for me in the movie that muteness is associated with like lesser intelligence. But how is it that Bad Ape can talk? I mean, he actually says, I just listened to like the trainers talk and then I could talk. But
I will say this is something that I don't think the modern trilogy has ever been clear on, in the sense of which apes can talk, which apes only sign, which apes can do both. And it's funny because you're right. Like in the first two films, when Caesar talks, like the first time Caesar talks and the James Franco character hears him, James Franco acts the hell out of that. I remember that. He is like thoroughly rattled by that. Like it's sort of like paradigm.
Because he also, biologically, their physiology is not supposed to be able to form words. So there is
but like I'm waving away that one.
Okay.
But also it happens again in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, because when Caesar leads, all the other apes on horseback to sort of essentially intimidate the human outpost, and he starts speaking, they all again react very like shocked.
And also he's the only one that can speak, which is another weird thing.
No, but that's not true. In Dawn, we also hear Maurice
speak. At first, he's the only
speak.
one that can speak.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then it's also a big deal. I think it's Koba that speaks, and then it's a big deal when Koba speaks.
Yeah. But you're right that I don't think they're consistent on what is it. Like, can all apes talk? Like, what's going on? And like, some of them don't. I agree with you. That's a fair point.
But it is also an interesting point, which is like, do the apes in France speak French, or do they not speak at all, and have like their own sign language that they've invented? Because I remember pointing this out, that there's been times where it's been discovered that non-hearing people or non-speaking people who grow up in isolation often can develop their own.
They'll develop their own version of sign language. It might not be ASL, but it's absolutely sign language. No, that's correct. So, for those of you who are not patrons, now's the time where we have to take our ad break. We'll be right back after these messages for the good automobiles at Chevrolet.
And now we're back, and my question is, why are all these stalled Chevys out in the middle of nowhere when this is a very slow-moving apocalypse? There we go.
Yes.
There should not be traffic jams in a slow-moving apocalypse. I think we've established that when we talk about, I think in the Colony, we talked about that. So.
Also Civil War, I believe it came up.
Yes, that is correct. Okay.
Which again continues my goal of just bringing up Civil War.
In Civil War, there would be traffic jams because it's a fucking war and people are trying to get out and then they get bombed.
Yeah, although if you recall, like, again, we're going to divert to Civil War. Wasn't there like a time where they're driving through the cars and like there's like smoke coming from the cars or something? It would indicate a recent traffic jam, which I'm not quite sure worked, but You know what? We'll have to wait for it to come out on streaming for me to check that one out.
DVD. I'm going to get the Blu-ray. We'll talk about it again. It'll be fun. Go ahead.
All right, let's get to Act 3, meet our Colonel Kurtz. Caesar is introduced to the Colonel. They trade barbs, and then Caesar is sent to work with the other apes, who have been deprived of food and water, to build wooden barricades to protect the facility. Caesar deduces that the other human forces are going to attack the Colonel's militia. Protesting the brutal treatment, Caesar threatens a work stoppage unless his apes are given food and water. When the Colonel threatens to kill Caesar, however, the other apes get back to work. Brought to his office, the Colonel explains to Caesar that the simian flu has mutated, rendering those infected with the new strain mute and brain-fogged. The Colonel ordered his troops to kill any carriers of the new version of the simian flu before they could infect other people, including his own son. His superiors did not approve that order, so there's a fight a-brewing. Caesar is kept starving to force his tribe to work. Maurice, Bad Ape, and Rocket discover a tunnel system underneath the base. Nova then sneaks onto the base to feed Caesar. Rocket allows himself to be captured to distract the guards from Nova, and so he and Caesar can formulate a plan to escape. Anna, you brought this up before, but it's worth mentioning. I sort of like the simian flu mutation plot point if you're trying to get to, like, how does the society look the way when the original Planet of the Apes start? How do humans become mute? But I will say I agree with you that the film is not entirely clear about the effects of the flu. And maybe, I'm going to give you an opening here, Anna, because there's a child actress involved. So it might be because Amaya Miller, who plays Nova, plays her as mute, but in no way mentally impaired otherwise. And indeed, it's I think a nice performance. But, Anna, do you want to blame this on the kid? I know you like to blame the kids.
I think that she is completely adequate in her performance.
And now we have the least you can do tagline. Right. That's good.
And notably adequate, perhaps. Yeah, this is like where I get to, and I think the film is a little ableist because it does do this very distinct association with muteness, but not being able to talk and some kind of mental impairment. And also I was realizing that I think when we did Rogue One, we were discussing what other movies are based entirely on a retcon. And this is like...
Yeah, this is definitely
one
a retcon,
of them.
Yeah.
And what bothers me is they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to decide to retcon to the original Planet of the Apes. I mean, it's kind of a cute thing to do, and I think the muteness might have been. Why did you go to mentally impaired? That's the
no, and I agree with you. Like if you render them mute, that's one thing. That is a disability. I mean, it's not. And
it would. And that's enough of. And that's enough of a retcon. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're trying...
That's all you needed to do for the retcon, is the point.
Because I think that they made them... And also, we don't get any evidence of that, and that's what you're pointing at. We don't get any evidence that they're any less intelligent. It's just a thing that people say, which maybe that's calling out ableism on some level. Yay.
And it's weird, because actually, the two adults that you see who are, like, newly infected with this, their reaction is both the same, which is they're clearly trying to articulate something. They have thoughts. They're just frustrated that they can't speak. And of course... Ironically, maybe that's it. It's like they're so ableist that they both want to just die as a result. It's a very weird thing.
And I want to point out, as far as like the retconning goes, is if you make them, I think the reason, just trying to get inside the movie makers' heads here, I think maybe the reason they tacked on the mental disability to the muteness is to explain why the humans are in such a debased state of affairs by the time we get to the original Planet of the Apes. But I think you could just explain it by the fact that they've been hunted by the apes.
By the way, just to warn you, I mean, I've seen the trailer for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and this is going to annoy you, I think, in the new one, because I think the main human character, the thing that makes her distinctive is she can talk. So
I mean, it's not talking that like bothers me. It's just that it's the association of muteness with
a mental
impairment.
Yeah,
and I don't. There's no reason. I mean, they may be weirdly calling out ableism, but to say that, and if
I think you're giving a little too much credit to the film.
I know, yeah. Which is unlike me.
I was gonna say, that's normally my job.
Please continue.
All right, let's close out with Act 4, only happy endings in Lake Tahoe. Caesar and his tribe escape the fort via a combination of underground tunnels and the most clueless guards in the history of cinema. This is important. This is where I really didn't like this film. Like, this is where they were clearly relying on the great escape tropes. They're communicating, they're digging tunnels. That's fine. I did like this. They throw monkey feces at one of the guards to, like, bring him in, lure him in, and, get the keys and so forth. But like, they're all getting out of their pens. You actually see in the background guards walking around, and they just don't notice any of this. It's bad.
The thing I want to point out that's, to me, something of a plot hole is that you might have some humans learn ASL at some point during all of this.
Fair point. Yeah.
Like, just to realize, just at some point when they realize that, oh, how are the apes? Someone might just wonder, how are the apes communicating? They're building whole societies. They must have some form of communication. Perhaps we can figure it out. Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, the other military forces arrive and attack the facility. Caesar again leaves his apes to try to kill the colonel in his cabin because this time it's personal, but then sees that the colonel has become mute after handling a doll that had belonged to Nova. Unwilling to kill the colonel himself, Caesar allows him to commit suicide with his gun. You had a problem with the doll being the disease vector. I remember this.
Yeah, but also it's not, I don't know, it's unwilling to kill the colonel himself. I think it's more like he's disgusted and he's like, all right, if you think this is a death sentence and you're going to kill yourself over this, fine. I think that's actually sadder.
I disagree with you on this one. This is Caesar going to actually like be just a vessel of vengeance or not? I think that's, again, I think you're actually like, you're being more generous to the film than the film actually is. But it could be either way. That's fair. Okay.
It's my own brain fog creeping in about my memory of the movie.
The escaping apes get caught in the crossfire between the militia and the military. Caesar attempts to destroy a fuel tank to eliminate the militia, but he is wounded by Preacher, a militiaman he set free in Act 1. Oh, the irony.
Militia ape.
Yes. No. Preacher is a militia man. He's.
Oh, okay, you're right. Preacher's a militia man that he set free to go back. Yes. Oh, the irony.
Yes. Oh, the irony. Exactly. Seeing apes being gunned down and killed en masse, Red finally rebels and kills Preacher. That's who you were thinking of.
Yes.
Before being executed by another militia man. Yes. Caesar blows the fuel tank, which destroys the facility. The explosion then triggers an avalanche that conveniently buries the other military. Which was the thing that I remembered.
They just look up and it's like, ooh.
Yeah. Caesar, Nova, and the apes avoid the avalanche by scaling up trees. The apes and Nova migrate to the oasis, and with the apes in their new home, Caesar succumbs to his wound and dies. Anna, I think the moment I did laugh the hardest rewatching this film, and not in a good way, was when the other military, the ostensibly triumphant military, spots Caesar while they're celebrating, and then they don't do anything. They just sort of look at him like, oh, what's going on there? And then by the time, then the snow falls. That was goofy and not in a positive way. And also, they really should have just named Caesar Moses in this. This is a classic Moses story.
As far as military tactics go, Dan.
Yes.
What do you think of the strategy of the incoming army?
Not good. Nope. Pretty bad. Also, flying all your helicopters that close together. Yeah, it's a cool apocalypse now kind of thing. Not really what you want to do, probably.
Well, what I noticed is the whole battle is set up like an hourglass, almost. Yeah. Like they funnel into each other, which I think in either case, you would be like, I mean, if you're the defending, I guess you want the funnel, right? Because then you set up snipers and it's a box canyon kind of situation. Right. But if you're the incoming army and you see oh, this is just a narrow entrance, we are filing in there as though...
Maybe we do it a little more stealthily. Maybe we don't just mass our forces. Yeah. I will say it made sense why the colonel had his fort there because it looked like if you looked from the shots you could see there was no rear to attack from. So that made sense. You knew where you were defending against, but still, let's put it this way. You're right. The encroaching military got what they deserved in terms of being buried. Not the brightest tacticians.
And they wouldn't have won without Caesar blowing up the fuel tank.
That is, we don't know how that would have gone, but I think you're right. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Moving on. I have a question.
Go ahead, Anna.
It is that I hated Caesar's death. I thought that was really dumb.
Right. Yes.
Because he's apparently gravely wounded, and then he carries his kid for however long. I mean, who knows how long does it take to ride on horseback to Lake Tahoe from wherever they were? It's not a short ride, and he's
it's clearly supposed to last a while. Yeah,
while they get there, and doesn't say anything to anyone, and isn't like, "Hey, I might need some medical help because once we get there, I'm planning on dying." I thought it might have been more like, there's a part of me that was like, is he really going to die? Or is he just going to kind of be like, all right, my work here is done. Like, I can just become a dad, you know, like I can retire from leading the apes.
I will say this is where like I was angry at the film, because the implication clearly from the way the film does it is like, no, what only matters is whether he's the leader. Like, doesn't matter whether he's a dad or not. Like, he can just die. Yeah. Like, you know, that was also the thing that annoyed me.
Yeah, like if you're,
because like Cornelius, that poor kid Cornelius, his mother and his older brother totally kept. Cornelius, you know, Caesar should have an incentive to try to keep living, you know, because like it's like he almost wants to.
Is he bleeding on the kid as he's carrying him? Like, what is going on? Like, it can't be good for you to carry a child while you're bleeding out of a chest wound.
Yeah, the other thing is that it's like, you know, at the very end, Maurice clearly it indicates that he knows that Caesar is about to die. I'm like, you know, if chimps really have that great of a smell, wouldn't they have picked that up before they actually arrived in Lake Tahoe? It just seems.
Yeah, so it's dumb.
As I think. Yeah, what I said, I think if I recall, what I was thinking was it would have been moderately amusing / interesting if they had the end like Shane, where you just see Caesar riding off, like, you know, on a horse, like slumped over. And it's like, is he dead? Is he not? You know.
But again, he's a dad. And I also want to just point out that I've been using the word dumb. And there are some people that say we shouldn't use the word dumb as a synonym for stupid.
Okay.
I tend to, in these kinds of areas, try to modify my language if someone gets offended by it, because I feel like no skin off my nose to do things that make people feel more comfortable. This is one of those cases where I forget all the time, but I thought I'd mention it. So,
okay,
since I've made such a big deal about it, especially.
Yes.
All right, I do have a question for you, Dan, and it has nothing to do with ableist language.
Oh, please.
Is there IR in this movie?
Anna, Grant and Lee, Wellington and Napoleon, Custer and Sitting Bull, Cox and Dresner.
Like Woody Harrelson, you drew that out way too long.
You're probably not much of an IR lady, but this is a big moment, Anna, because there is a decent amount of IR in this film. The most obvious is just sort of the anthropocentric sovereignty. We've talked about this before. This is the concept that Alex Wendt and Bud Duvall have talked about humans basically not possibly allowing for the possibility that there could be any other species out there that could be more advanced or superior to them. And that sort of explains why, you know, the humans react the way they do to Caesar demonstrating his intelligence and so on and so forth. Related to that, the idea that war serves different purposes. You know, for Caesar, releasing the soldiers at the beginning of the movie is a form of bargaining. He's trying to signal to the colonel, look, I don't want to actually, you know, kill your army. I don't want to invade. Just like leave us alone and you will actually have some, you know, modicum of peace. But the problem is that for the colonel, he literally describes this as a holy war, which that's an incommensurate goal. And indeed, the colonel also posits another reason for wanting to fight, and the way he describes it, it's a power transition problem. Basically, he thinks that apes are stronger and at least as smart as man, which means that by his logic, peaceful coexistence is impossible. That essentially the apes will eventually be strong enough to defeat man, and so he feels like he has to attack now. And indeed, to be fair, based on what happens in Kingdom, and also based on the idiocy of the army that gets buried under the avalanche, the colonel might be right there. Just going to say. And finally, there is an interesting sort of, you know, odd digression about the laws of war, because for Caesar, the killing of his family is a war crime. For the colonel, it is collateral damage, because he makes it very clear. He says this multiple times. He didn't know that he had killed Caesar's wife and child. He thought he had killed Caesar. And I hate to say this, I'm going to side with the batshit insane colonel in the sense of the laws of war. If he actually thought he was killing Caesar, then yes, it's obviously the killing of civilians, but it's not the intentional killing of civilians. And that's the violation of the laws of war.
I'm thinking about what the laws of war are.
The laws of war is you were supposed to try to minimize, you know, civilian casualties, minimize collateral damage.
Does he not realize he's shooting the wife and child? I think
no,
he doesn't. I think he doesn't realize he's shooting the son,
right?
But there's a baby that's shot and the wife that's shot, right?
No, the baby isn't shot because Cornelius is the baby. Cornelius survives.
wife is shot. Does he not?
The wife
realize
is
he's
shot,
shooting
and
the
the
wife?
older brother is shot, and the older brother is about the same size as Caesar.
You're
I
thinking
don't
he
think
doesn't
so.
realize he's shooting the wife.
Yeah, but also, like,
All right.
you know, I'm just saying, like,
All right, fine. Fog of war. People get shot. Wives and children, they die. You know, war is bad.
Do you want me to have, like, do you want to even do the critique of capitalism, or do you just want to, you know, let
We're gonna
Karen...
let. Do you want to even do the critique of capitalism?
Okay.
Dan, do I want to do the critique of capitalism? I want to do the critique of capitalism, but I did it first time we recorded, and it was so
That's
perfect.
True. Yes, you're never going to be able to repeat
fun.
that.
I'm never going to be able to top it. So,
okay,
folks, we're just going to rerun with somewhat not perfect sound our first recording of this section.
Doodly-doo, doodly-doo, doodly-doo.
Doodly-doo-doodly-doo-doodly-doo.
Okay, here we go. Is there by any chance a critique of capitalism in this film?
Dan, there are times when it is necessary to abandon our humanity in order to save our humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I texted you, this movie has there is a not small cottage industry in looking at the revolutionary and anti-capitalist messages of this series. Specifically this series, not the original series, the reboot prequel series.
Right.
I will read you one kind of typical analysis, is that this movie depicts the revolutionary struggle against the capitalist state. The post-humanist agents of revolutionary are biologically augmented animal-human hybrids. Post-humanism is central to the modern anti-capitalist struggle. Can't center the humans, Dan. Got to embrace the post-humanist pan-species struggle. You don't think? What you're
I will
laughing,
say,
you're smiling.
No. It is true though that this film, of the three that have come out recently, is, you know, centers the apes the most, would be the way to put it. So that's fair, and like actually, it's built into the structure of the film because we only figure out the simian flu thing as Caesar does.
Right.
So that's the way in which we wind up identifying with the apes. You know, the rest of it, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah, I know. Some slightly more subtle critiques make the point that some of the more ham-fisted ones are like, and the apes live in a non-capitalist society, right? Like they're living in their shared community, whatever. One of the more, I think, hard-eyed, you know, analysis I read pointed out that the ape utopian paradise is almost, as I quote, laughably dumb. That there's a lot of poetry to it. They have art, and that's great. It is sort of a condescending primitivism. And I will note, this movie introduces gender-coded costuming in order to not have women speak. Like, one thing I noticed in the other two movies is that there could be women among them. Like all the revolutionaries are and they're, I mean, but even if they're not identified, because they all look like their secondary sexual characteristics are not obvious.
No, hold on, because I'm going to push back on this because I watched Dawn today a little bit, like bits of it, and like the girl apes, if you notice, like their hair is braided. They had a little bit of adornment.
But in Dawn, that's not true.
What, Dawn is the second one or the first one? Sorry,
Dawn is the second one. Rise is the first. Yeah, they should be named differently. Rise
they really should be named better. Yeah. No, in the second one, there is braiding. No, I saw it.
There is braiding, but it's more subtle. And if you in the group shots, like
you wouldn't know.
There can be. Yeah. In this one, this is the first time. You're right. There's braiding in the second one. And this time, when there's like complicated braiding. There's like flowers and shit, you know?
Yes, no, like, that's fair.
And it seems,
that is fair. Yeah.
It's introduced in order to let you clearly see that all of the soldiers are men. Like,
I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're right. That's true. No, that's a good point. Yeah. No, I can see the point there.
And also, Caesar rules with an iron fist in a apparent is it a monarchy? Is it a hereditary monarchy? Like, it's not clear, but like, it's not a democracy. That's for sure. Right?
No, it's not.
Yeah. And I read a fun article that said, well, what kind of economy would apes produce? Like, if more realistically, because it sort of, this article took as a premise, like, it's not going to stay like some kind of communal, like, co-op, right? But notes that in this particular series, the apes either lack the knowledge or the will or the incentives to use their new intelligence to acquire science, technology, and institutions and behaviors necessary to recreate a capitalist economy. However, Dan.
Yes.
Monkeys can be taught capitalism. And there is a paper.
Oh, God. Oh, God, help me.
Which
I'm
I now must summarize for you.
Oh, no!
So, scientists introduced currency to a group of chimps. Discs, like just metal discs.
Yeah.
And they were all 1-to-1 value for snacks. A lot of different kinds of snacks. Bananas, grapes, apples, whatever. Then they introduced one of the snacks being bigger than the others, and they got half of an apple rather than just like a piece of fruit, but kept all the prices the same. So you would get a bigger piece of fruit for the same price. And guess what the monkeys did?
They all demanded the bigger piece of fruit.
They used their coins to buy apples, since you got more apple per coin.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. They engaged in arbitrage.
Then the scientists then introduced two different salesmen, so differently identified scientists. Monkeys can tell the difference between people.
I'm sorry. I'm just picturing the idea of the salesman. Keep going.
Probably wore little like bowler caps. Are you thinking? Or
how are you doing, Caesar? I would like to introduce you to the most amazing product that you and your colony are going to enjoy tremendously. I've got it right here. Can I come in, please?
Yeah, because I'm picturing traveling salesmen more than like a home shopping network here.
Yes.
So exactly. Salesman A sold apples at the same price. You get half an apple for you get 2/4 of an apple for the same price. Salesman B sometimes had BOGO sales. You gave him the same disc and he would give you 2 pieces of apple, but just randomly. So one salesman A, you pay the coin and he gives you one piece of apple.
I see. Salesman
B, you give a coin and he would sometimes give you 1 piece of apple, and then occasionally just kind of randomly, generously, I guess, day old apple or something.
Give you an extra.
Gives you, yeah. Guess what, Dan?
Did the apes want to deal much more with the second salesman?
They did. Then it starts to get interesting.
Oh, God, Anna. How much?
There's just 2 more things. So
did the salesman introduce credit default swaps? Does it end with credit default swaps?
They introduced tranches of apples.
Long story short, the apes now own a lot of cryptocurrency.
I thought you could do long story short, but a lot of apes were evicted.
That's exactly. Long story short, ape bankruptcy skyrocketed.
They were getting, what do they call those loans? They had no credit check, no
ninja. They were getting ninja loans. Yeah. No income, no job.
Banks didn't have jobs. Banks didn't care.
Now I really want to see someone make a version of The Big Short with all apes. Can they do The Big Short with all the CGI? Like, Christian Bale could play the ape, Steve Carell could be an ape character. That would be amazing.
I'm going to finish this goddamn paper, Dan. What they did next is salesman A and B would both randomly BOGO.
Okay.
randomly give 2 pieces of apple for the same price.
Okay.
This is fascinating, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The monkeys begin to prefer salesman A because he is perceived as to have changed, I guess, his strategy. Like they see him as being more generous, even though
relative to what it was before. Yeah,
right.
That's interesting. Actually, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Last thing. Then salesmen A and B go back to selling apples at the same exact price. One coin, one piece of apple. Monkeys stayed with salesman A.
Path dependence. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. All right. So, but let's get back to the movie. Caesar knows full well that he could introduce capitalism to the ape society. Yeah, he knows it. He chooses not to.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, decides to institute what essentially is a benign authoritarian regime. And so here, actually, Dan, capitalism might be a necessary step to revolution. That is what I'm kind of saying here. Like,
oh, that is Marxist. Well done.
Thank you.
Nice. I appreciate that. Bravo. That was one of the better discussions of capitalism. I think we've got a lot of ideas to work out. I think we could potentially get a grant, do some more monkey experiments. I really do think
more monkey research. Can we do some?
We could do more monkey research. I think with this financial engineering and monkey experiments, this is a vein that we can tap. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, we can do the Theranos of monkey.
Okay.
Moving on, Dan.
Yes. All right, it's time for the least you can do. So we have noticed as we have gone on with this podcast that at various times, Anna or I, usually Anna, but sometimes I do it, we damn a movie with faint praise. Praise that would be very funny if it were on the movie poster as a, critical endorsement. Anna, do you have any such faint praise for this film?
I think we already both covered sort of what we can say. I think, a tolerable performance by a child actor is about what I can do. That is actually, I think I've said that by other child actors. That is my scale for child actors, is tolerable versus intolerable. I guess sometimes I really hate it. We've done a couple where I've been like, no, this.
Oh no, you've hated the performance, but no,
should not be in this movie.
By the way, this actually makes me want to do an interview with a vampire just so you can rate Kirsten Dunst's performance because she's amazing in that. Yeah.
Maybe there are some children that should be replaced by animatronic apes
or CGI.
There we go. Yeah. This is going to solve a whole industry-wide problem of exploitation of child actors.
There we go.
Yeah. CGI children.
I believe my tagline, if memory serves, I think this is still accurate. The 10th best Woody Harrelson performance in the last 10 years. Yes.
There you go. Yep. And then I try to make you name the other 9. And I think there might be more than 9. I mean, he's a good actor.
Oh, he appears a lot. He acts a lot. So yeah.
And I remember him in Cheers. Did we all kind of underestimate him? That is my question. I think
we all absolutely underestimated him. I don't think we realized. Basically, from the moment he shaved his head, or lost his hair, however you want to think about it, he's been amazing in a lot of different stuff. And actually, in some ways, that was one of the disappointing things about this film. We talked about this. Gary Oldman was great in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. He was a good villain.
I thought he was also in this movie.
Yes, exactly. And also, by the way, Jason Clarke was good as the human hero as well. They both gave compelling performances. Yeah. I was expecting Woody Harrelson to be really good in this. He's okay. It's not like he's ever bad, but there's nothing distinctive about this role. It was actually...
I kind of blame the script on this. Sometimes you can do more than a script gives you, but this was really also, I think the thing about his kid is weird. I don't know. I'm not sure how to say that doesn't work, why it doesn't work, but it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And I mean, I hate to say this. I do think this is on Harrelson because it is sort of his biggest monologue. Yeah. So there's a way in which it presumably could have been more compelling, but it's just not. There's no other way to put it.
Also, he winds up shooting. It's sort of this weird telegraph thing where he's going to wind up shooting his kid, right?
Yeah. No, honestly, the scene where Harrelson is, I think the most compelling is the scene where he's infected. His sense of desperation in that moment is legitimately compelling. But that's pretty much it.
All right.
All right.
So if we were apes, that would be racist.
Social justice apes are going to be so fucking pissed at you, Anna, right now. Wow. They're going to be like, really, Anna? Wow. Okay,
canceled
sure.
By the apes. Cancellation of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, that would be a great cancellation. That is going to be inevitably the final film.
Like with an ape Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
With an ape Jordan Peterson. Like, being interviewed by ape Joe Rogan.
Ape Joe Rogan. Yep. Yeah.
I want to see that movie so bad.
Honestly, it would be actually funny if someone just came up with a way of doing that film where, like, it's literally just those guys talking, and all they do is replace them with CGI versions of apes. Like, that would be legitimately fascinating. All right, it's time for Discordant Notes.
People say bad ape is a racist trope. I say, you can't be funny anymore. Like, what is it with I remember when you were allowed to make jokes about uplifted apes that hadn't gotten socialized. They're funny. They're hilarious.
Anna, whatever happened when Friends? There was Marcel the monkey. You know, that was classic comedy gold. You couldn't do that nowadays. You get canceled. The PC apes would be after you. It's not how it worked. Yeah.
Okay. And then the Jordan, I was going to try to do a Jordan. He talks like Kermit. I can't figure out how to talk like Kermit. I'm not doing it. All right. He talks like Kermit. But now we're doing Discordant Notes. So what did this person in the Discord ask us, Dan?
So Billy West in Space asked us, what sort of cultural differences would uplifted apes have based on their species of origin? Could that have improved the movie?
Well, and that's racist.
So it is worth pointing out, this was present in the original Planet of the Apes. We see the gorillas being like the military, there's the orangutans ruling everything, and the chimps are sort of lower class. To be honest, in the more modern films, I think what's legitimately interesting is that these differences are manifested not by species, but by upbringing. So yes. Caesar is the more benevolent leader, in no small part because he is raised in a much more benevolent way. Koba is a research ape that was badly treated. Unsurprisingly, he winds up being extremely cruel. And as we talked about before, Bad Ape was a zoo ape, and so as a result has a more, let's say, stunted
social skills.
Social skills.
So the movie actually comes down much more on the nurture versus nature, which is a less racist. I mean, I'm not really kidding.
No, that actually is a more interesting. It's a nurture argument. You're absolutely correct. Yeah. Yes.
And there is perhaps a argument that different ape species have different skill sets. You know, like, I mean, there is some kind of evolutionary differences between ape species that lend them to like different, you know, tasks. But it's fundamentally kind of racist. So anyway.
It's the debris field. This is when we talk about things that we did not discuss elsewhere in the podcast.
Either the first or second time that we've talked about this.
I don't have a ton. I've got like 3 or 4 things. Anna, do you have stuff?
Yeah, I have stuff.
Okay,
I feel like they're not living in the Muir Woods anymore, although I guess 15 years would make a difference. I don't know. Like, it just doesn't look like Northern California anymore.
Well, the second film is 5 years after the War for the Planet of the Apes takes place 5 years after, I think, Dawn
just
of the
like
Planet
how
of the
much
Apes.
more overgrown. Like, I mean, yay, pretty trees, but it just doesn't look like Northern California anymore.
Well, part of the weird thing is like literally like the weather just is very strange. Like when they're in the woods, it feels tropical, and then there's a moment where like they're on the beach, but it's snowing. It was very, you know, like I couldn't figure out what time of year it was.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the least of its problems, but it's the first thing I have written down.
Okay. One of the things I actually really thought was part of the reason I think I was disappointed with this film is that the opening shot is actually great. It's a fantastic shot of all of these human soldiers like walking along with the donkey apes to try to attack. And the camera zooms in on the helmets. And the helmets all have like, frankly, horrible ape, like death to apes things, including one that says bedtime for Bonzo.
And my question to you is, how would this 20-year-old grunt know what Bedtime for Bonzo was.
Right. So for our listeners, who were born in the 21st century or born in the 90s for that matter, the reason Bedtime for Bonzo is funny is that Bedtime for Bonzo was a film that came out, I believe, in the 1950s involving a chimp and also co-starring Ronald Reagan, who was the president of the United States, subsequently in the 1980s.
Right. He once was an actor. That's something also that perhaps people born in the 90s might not know.
Also a union leader. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. A union leader. I have a note that there is a lot of malevolent staring in this movie, that seems to be like one of the key acting notes that someone was given is, could you stare a little malevolently at someone else? Like Caesar does a lot of that. There's a lot of like glowering. Which I do
recall you saying when we recorded this before that this was the first time where like you liked circus in the first two films, but this one there was an occasional moment where you're like, this is a little silly.
Yeah, I laughed a little more at some of the glowering got to be a lot. That didn't feel like it was acting. That felt like it was just like, I'm now in it's personal mode. Like It was
part of it, again, the moment that you said, like, I don't even know if this was a tagline, but if the tagline for this film is War for the Planet of the Apes, this time it's personal. Because that's basically what the plot is. And it's actually kind of silly when you think about it. Yeah. Something that I referenced this before, it's a tick that always annoys me. Sunglasses at night as a movie trope is really stupid. If there's anything we should have learned from the recent eclipse, it's that when you wear sunglasses, it's really freaking dark, okay? Like, why are you doing that in the middle of the night? Like, you're not going to see anything. It looks cool, I grant you that. It's like smoking. It looks really cool when you do it. It's actually a horrible idea. Just going to leave that there.
I do think that the politics of this movie are kind of weird. Like, really? Like, are they trying to map on slavery, like enslaved people onto the apes? It's not, like, there's some definite parts where they seem to be doing that, like also this fear that if what you talked about, like if the apes get smart enough, like that they can't coexist, which was a thing that white slave, owners in the South, like did worry about, was if we let our enslaved people learn how to read, if we allow them to become more educated, then they will certainly rise up. So there is like something there, but there's also, I do have written in my notes, build the wall. So, there's that.
Actually, speaking of which, one of the things I did like, and in some ways I think could have, it's a B plot in this film, but like I actually think they could have developed it a little bit further, was the whole idea of the Vichy apes, as it were.
Yeah.
The donkeys who sort of help the humans. That was interesting, and like there are ways in which I wish they had fleshed that out a little bit more. In the end, Red rebelling, okay, sure, whatever, but like it would have been more interesting to hear what they were thinking.
The reason I didn't like that is I didn't feel that they were treated well enough to do the betrayal, right?
Right. In other words, you would, I think you're right that like actually it would have been more interesting if the humans had treated them a little bit better, had actually like given them more food. Like if you had shown those apes getting preferential treatment,
the house apes,
then it's interesting.
You might say.
Yes, the house apes or the concentration camp guards, however you want to.
Whatever terrible metaphor you want to point back to.
Yeah.
I think it's my turn, and I want to say that the dying apes are the most impressive use of CGI. Like, because when you see the light, we often say when someone dies, you see the light go out of their eyes. I don't think that's the literal thing that happens, but there is this kind of like relaxing of the face or this kind of sigh.
The muscles,
they're dying. I don't know. I just think it's a really subtle use of CGI, and it works.
I agree with you in the sense of it's the kind of thing that, like, on an intuitive level when you're watching, like, oh, that ape died, and it's actually in some ways astonishing that they have to like scientifically calculate how are they going to do this, but it's extremely believable. I agree with you. The CGI, and again, the one also with like the very intense close-ups of Maurice when he is dealing with Nova, also extraordinary. My last thing is, again, it was amusing to see the Chevy Nova being advertised in this film. Also, the Coca-Cola ad, like there was an abandoned Coca-Cola truck. I was like, yep, sure. Product placement is tough with this movies, but they managed to pull it off. Good for them.
I think there's too much slow-mo and swelling music. That is, especially towards the end, when Red recognizes...
Was there slow-mo? I don't remember there being slow-mo.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And
All right.
it's actually kind of slow-mo, or it's a slowly paced moment when Red realizes that his allegiances are shifting, like that he's going to help save Caesar. There is this moment where he like,
it's just the sound. It's just like the orchestral music.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And then the other thing is, it made me think, like, if you're using these apes you're not treating very well to help load your ammunition, like that seems like a bad idea.
Probably not the best in terms of safety protocols. I agree with you. Yeah.
And then I don't really have much. I remember something I was going to be about the behind the scenes. I just remembered is that they had an ASL consultant in this movie, and people who sign ASL felt like very well, like it's like a good representation.
Oh, good.
And they tried to be very faithful to that language, and I guess they had a really good consultant on it, and I can't remember her name now. But
excellent.
I think that is
good for the filmmakers. That's always should be rewarded. All right, I think that's about it, Anna. The nicest thing I can say about this, actually, the real tagline is that I enjoyed talking about this mediocre film with you twice.
Testament to our friendship more than the movie, I would say. All right, true. So in closing, thank you to patrons and non-patrons. Thank you to anyone who's listening for bearing with us for this repeat performance. Any excuse to talk to Dan some more. Love it. We have other things going on. You can always find us on social media. Blue Sky, you are at Dan Dresner. I'm at Anna Marie Cox. I'm also on Twitter occasionally now, not much. I was encouraged to go back on by people who make money off of me when I get work. Dan, you have a Substack.
I have a Substack. It's called Dresner's World. Write mostly about international affairs. Sometimes I write about higher education more recently, and I'm I think I'm going to be writing something about Shogun that'll probably be up by the time this podcast.
Are you enjoying Shogun?
I enjoyed Shogun immensely. Yes. Were you enjoying it?
I watched like the first 2 episodes and
wasn't as crazy about it. I will write up why I enjoyed it, and then we can maybe talk about it later. It's obviously not sci-fi, but there is a lot of IR in it. Would be the way.
Dan, you want to ask me? It's other stuff that I'm up to.
What are you up to, Anna?
Dan, I have a Substack.
You have a Substack? Really? Oh my God! I no longer have to worry about defying Anna's prediction about Substack ending.
I still think newsletters are terrible and not going to save journalism. But and this is one reason actually why I sort of think that is I was going to do something about the movie Civil War every day, and I do think about the movie every day still. But it is really hard to like write a newsletter and do other stuff, and especially. This gets to what I think is a systemic problem with it. Actually, is I do think just producing content without people to support you is pretty difficult. And I think that having to depend on doing a newsletter, and I know, Dan, you don't depend on it, but no. As a journalist, trying to replace income by doing a newsletter is too hard. It is
no, I agree with you. Yeah, that's.
And I'm not trying to do that. This is just a labor of love, but it is. And also, like I did on previews and stuff, I did some research on. It is these top 0.3% of Substack newsletters that make 90% of the company's money.
Sure,
it's like podcasting. The tail.
It's like a lot of things. It's the power law distribution. Always never underestimate the power law distribution. It's a superstar economy. It's the top, as you say, just.
And this is a case of also it's a gold rush. The later you got started in this, the harder it is to succeed. And it is also for journalists, it is a model that rewards the least amount of effort possible, the least amount of research, the least amount of editing, because you are pressured to just put out content and the doing a lot of research on something. For me personally, I'm a long incubating kind of writer.
You're a long form lady.
Yeah, and I don't even not necessarily even like writing long form, although I enjoy writing long form. That's another thing that newsletters aren't great for.
But doing the research to actually produce them.
Yeah, I like to noodle around on stuff. I like to talk to people about it. I like to interview people. And doing upfront work is not incentivized, right?
I would say that for me, it's a slightly different thing in that it really does feel like sort of going back to blogging.
Opinion havers.
It's blogging.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're an opinion haver.
Right. For me, it works. And it also works because for me, and I think this is, I mean this sincerely, this is the difference between doing journalism versus doing opinion or scholarship. For me, it's an intellectual sketchpad. Like the stuff that I write for Substack is rarely what I think is a finished product. It is I'm noodling about this. This is what I am thinking. And I describe it as contingent writing, which is fine. I'm upfront about that. But for journalism, I don't think that works. It's a different sort of thing.
Yeah, and maybe that's a problem for me because I don't like to put out stuff that's not finished. Like,
I'm okay with. I mean, this is where I'm surprised to hear that because, like, in some ways, that kind of always was what blogging felt like. So this is,
right. And here's a thing that I've talked about before. It's not a secret, really. Is that I used to fucking workshop my blog post for Wonkette. Okay. I had a list of people that back in the days of IM, if I was working on a post for Wonkette, like I would IM several people and be like, do you think this is funny enough? Do you think, because I still have a principle in comedy writing, which is you don't go for the first level joke, you go for the second level joke. Like you don't go for the joke that everybody's going to make. Like you want to do the joke beyond that. And so I remember Jason Lincoln's, Corey Siecha, this guy named Alex Balk, who was another great early blogger, my friend Tracy. I didn't just throw shit up,
Yeah.
It took me 3 hours to write a 800-word post the other day for Civil War.
No, again, sometimes, I mean, it's not like, I understand that. And I think, let me put it this way, the
maybe
niche
that's a me problem.
Yeah. I mean, to the extent that I often have a niche when I'm writing about stuff, it might be because in some ways it's the second take. In other words, it's like, what is everyone saying? Yeah. I look at that and then I'm like, okay, what's interesting to me is this is being framed this way, but it could be framed this way or something else. That's my comfort zone when it comes to the Substack. And I think that's,
what I'll say, Dan, is that I think of podcasting as an intellectual sketchpad.
That also is true. I agree with that.
I am totally fine with this being a first draft.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is a me issue. And that's why people should subscribe to civilwars.substack.com.
Exactly.
Because it's perfect.
Yes. There we go.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for bearing with us. Until next time.
Keep this channel open for more.